Welcome everyone to Lessons in the Field. As you know, this is a series of interviews, and we have with us today Anna Purdum, who is a 1998 graduate from the College of Pharmacy in our non-traditional PharmD program. And Anna is now Executive Director for Global Market Access with Kite Pharma out in California. And we're very happy to have Anna here. And like our other guests, Anna's got a lot of great experience and is gonna provide that to us through a series of questions that we'll go through. And that insight will be, I think, very valuable for our students and alumni and friends who may be listening. So Dr. Purdum, thank you again for joining us today. I thought we could just start with you, perhaps just giving us a 3-minute tour of your career and your time since you were at the UIC College of Pharmacy.
Sure, thanks for having me. And like I said earlier, I always enjoy talking to students and sharing my experience to show non-traditional routes for pharmacy students and pharmacists. So thanks for having me. As you said, I started as a non-traditional pharmacy student even. I had a BS in pharmacy and went back to school in that non-traditional program that UIC offered for a while, completed my PharmD there. And one of the rotations I had while I was doing that was actually with Abbott in their pharmacoeconomics department, which led me to pivot my career a little bit. And so from that moment on, I kind of took a different route. I'd been working as a clinical pharmacist at Northwestern in Chicago, so a lot of great ties to Chicago. And once I did the rotation at Abbott, I realized that I really liked the business acumen blend with the clinical aspects. And so I went back to school, got a master's in health economics at University of Southern California. Thought we'd only be here a couple of years, but I ended up staying. I've been here ever since. And from my graduation, I've worked in various health economics or outcomes research roles in consulting, but mostly pharma. I've been in pharma for the last 15, 20 years. Worked in big pharma, including Pharmacia, which got bought by Pfizer. And then I went to Genentech, which got acquired by Roche. And then I went to BMS, and they've had some acquisitions there. But most recently, I've joined Kite. And I've been at Kite Pharma, which is a unique kind of startup biotech that has a very unique product. And I've always been very interested in oncology and always followed the science. And what I love about Kite is their innovative product. They have a cell therapy. So they actually take your cells and they genetically modify them, put markers on them so that they can identify lymphoma primarily in this case, and they're infused back into your body, and they actually are your own T cells that have now been kind of souped up and can fight the cancer, and they have a remarkable transformative results. So I'm very excited to work for them. In my role at Kite, I was originally in health economics, but as you mentioned, I've recently changed to a role in global market access. So my role now is really related heavily to health economics, but it's a global aspect where my role is to think about our products as they're coming to launch and think about what's going to be required for us to seek and receive reimbursement in all the countries around the world. So some of them are very HTA focused, health tech assessments. Others are looking for comparative effectiveness, and still others are looking for budget impact and things like that. So, we really need to understand what our product adds to value in the market as far as how that product compares to standard of care, what that, that clinical incremental benefit is, but also what are the economics of that, and create a compelling value story that transcends and hopefully we seek reimbursement with all the countries and get our products available for access for patients.
Well, thank you for that detail. I think a lot of times our students have heard of health economics and outcomes research and know that it exists in pharmaceutical companies, but maybe less so what that data is used for and how that's used to help expand markets and all of the regulatory and paperwork that needs to be done in that regard. So thank you. During your career, you've obviously been with a number of different companies and seen a lot of different products, I'm sure, come to market. But maybe you could just highlight for us, what's given you the most satisfaction in those positions that you've had, and maybe that it can be a motivator for some of our students or others listening.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit of a science geek, and I always follow the science. And at Northwestern, I really found oncology fascinating. I thought it was a very interesting and uniquely positioned role where you don't get a lot of exposure in pharmacy school actually. So it was I think a combination of the science and also the immunology that kind of now there's been a lot of transformation in oncology too. I've happened to have the good fortune for working for a lot of oncology companies that were doing transformative things. So I've always really followed the science and enjoyed that piece of it. So I'd say it's like some of my career highlights that I enjoyed the most is first Northwestern for introducing me to oncology. I didn't start in oncology. I kind of wound up in oncology, and I really developed a love for oncology at that point. And so from that point on, I always kind of looked for oncology companies because I have a strong belief in those. Everyone has a personal history as I do as well. So I think it was really meaningful for me to work for oncology companies specifically. So that led me to Genentech when I was, I think that's probably one of my career highlights as far as the remarkable products that they had and the ability to really change some paradigms. I remember our CEO said he liked to rewrite the textbooks. That was their level of science. They enjoyed looking for new innovative approaches to oncology care. So I learned a lot from that experience. I also was a MSL at the time, so I had a more clinical role, and I really dug deep into the oncology role. And then I transitioned to an outcomes research role at Genentech as well. I think, another really big transition for me was also Kite. Going to a startup to me was really kind of a little bit scary, but also really exciting. I knew that the therapy was going to be something really big. I joined the company before it was approved, and I believed in it. But there were also a lot of things. I started the HUR team as an N of one. And so I didn't have anybody to go to. And to be honest, my boss was the VP of Medical Affairs, and she was very good, but her expertise was not HEOR. So I was the subject matter expert and the only one there. So it was a little bit intimidating, but I loved it. And I thrived on being able to work with the key stakeholders and talking to our C-suite and telling them, explaining to them why it was important that we had an ICER review ongoing in the US, and they were looking at CAR Ts. And I think that's probably one of my biggest accomplishments that I'm most proud about from working at Kite was being able to achieve an ICER review, which is, I don't know if the students know, but ICER is an internal company in the US. It's a nonprofit that really seeks to look at value and be able to describe what the value for money is for therapies that are new and expensive in terms of the dollar amount for the product. So generally they are not very pharma friendly, but I'm very happy and proud of the work we did with them to not only demonstrate on our own independently that we were a cost-effective therapy, but they also came to that same conclusion. And I think a lot of that was because of the hard work we did in advance of that to help demonstrate what the incremental value would be for the product.
Yeah, well, excellent. Thank you, Anna. You may or may not know UIC's pharmacoeconomics group here is actually part of ICER. And
they're one of the modelers, right?
Yeah, it does some of the modeling. So yeah, we have a lot of deep expertise in HEOR here as well. But it's great to hear. I mean, it sounds like you've been really on the cutting edge of advances in oncology, and that must really be rewarding to see the companies that you're working for creating products that really impact patients and patient lives. So I can see why you enjoy it so much. So given that, though, I mean, the fact that you are working for companies that are out there, and developing new technologies and kind of on the edge of new therapies, how do you personally maintain your knowledge base and expertise? How do you stay up, because things change so much and so fast? I think it'd be useful maybe for some of our more recent graduates to hear how you stay on top of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, it's funny. I have two college students too, and I never realized how much self-education was required in a role and to continue to grow. I mean, I went back to school. I got a master's. I continue to get CES, does everybody. I go to the major conferences for ISPOR and AMCP to keep myself informed and educated. But there's also just a lot of independent review and independent reading that you do in your day-to-day job that I think I was probably not aware of as a student. I mean, I think that you learn a lot and then you learn a little bit after you graduate, but I'd say that the learning just continues, and it's about making sure that you're staying on top of it. So seeking out those people that are the experts and attending conferences and reading the latest thing for guidelines. ISPOR establishes some pretty useful guidelines that, they update periodically and staying informed in your subject matter expertise.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. So ISPOR, for anyone out there who doesn't know, the abbreviation is the International Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research. So Anna, I thought maybe next we could ask you a little bit more, going back all the way to the time that you were in Chicago and at UIC. So the program you did was a little bit different than most of our students these days. You got your bachelor's degree in pharmacy at Drake, and then you worked for a little while at Northwestern, and then you came back to UIC in what we called the CCO program, as a continuing curriculum option, basically designed as a post-PharmD or post-bachelor's PharmD. But maybe you could reflect on the time at UIC and then how that helped you prepare for your career, or what advice you might give students who are currently in our program and are, contemplating careers and unsure, how to prepare to be most competitive on the market. And, the marketplace for pharmacists is a little bit different now than it was at the time, especially in the more traditional pharmacy jobs. But as you mentioned in our pre-call, there are a lot of opportunities that students may not think about. And so I think maybe you can help inform them of those too. So
sure.
Take it from there.
And I, as you said, I had a BS in pharmacy where I'd already done rotations. I had probably been out of school about 8 years when I went back to get my PharmD. And so I really took a unique approach that I wanted to do very different rotations. I think that, there's some requirements of the patient level involvement that you have to do for your rotations. So you're somewhat limited, but I'd say what I would recommend to students is to really think about rotations that they think are going to really test them or stretch them. So if you have an interest in something, I don't know, if it's outside of the traditional, seek out those experiences, because I think that gives you a really good flavor for what it is. I think a great example is as I mentioned earlier, my rotation at Abbott with, at the time it was Steve Marks, who's very involved in mentor. He was my mentor, and he actually suggested, hey, you really seem to have a knack for this. Why don't you think about doing he was trying to get me to do a fellowship, but I ended up doing a master's program. So you never know where your rotation will lead you. I also had a really interesting rotation with University Health Systems Consortium at the time. And I think that also gave me a better understanding of what health tech assessments really were, because they were doing a lot of them at the time, way back in the 90s. So I think it exposes you and kind of makes you stretch and grow. And I think, trying to get experiences that you think are going to be interesting. And even if you don't get the perfect rotation for you, I would say follow up with people. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to give you 30 minutes of their time to share a little bit about what their role is. And you never know where that will lead you. It might lead you to, a chance to, do an internship or work for them someday down the road, or just let you know what that's like and let you know whether or not you're interested in seeking out more information.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the shout out for Steve Marks. He's a great alum and has mentored so many of our students at Abbott and now AbbVie, and encourage them like you to consider careers in health outcomes and outcomes research. And I think half the department at AbbVie is alumni of UIC, so we're pretty proud of that. So let me just ask the next question. Maybe I'll combine the two. We always like to get advice from our interviewees, that advice for our students or recent alums, or even any of us who can benefit from advice for careers or even life advice. So maybe either best advice that someone's given you that you'd like to pass on, and or other tips that you might have for success in the workplace, or balancing life, whether it's career and home life.
Yeah. I think the way to find passion in your work is to follow what excites you. At Genentech, they always said, follow the science. That was their mantra. I say, follow the science that gets you excited. So, I mean, all pharmacists are all about science, obviously, but there's so many different areas that you can go. And I would say, just follow what gets you excited, because if you're going to have to do something 8 hours a day, you better love what you do. So I think that's a early call out that I learned when I was young in my career, is just to follow what interested me, and it would keep me engaged at work and keep me kind of wanting to continue to grow. And I think later in my career, when I was more of a middle manager, I think somebody else told me, who was a manager who I really respected, was to be bold and to take risks. And I think that also, it can be scary to take a risk, but I think it also gives you a chance to do something that maybe you don't feel like you're completely qualified for, and that's okay. I think a lot of times early in your career, and I know a lot of women feel like, I need to have all the boxes checked off for the job responsibility. But I'm here to say that's not the case. You can often say, I have a transferable skill that makes me a good asset, and I keep your team more well-rounded, and I make you think about things you might not have. So
Mhm.
I would argue that sometimes you don't need to check all the boxes. You just need to be able to demonstrate what value you're going to bring to that team, to be bold and take risks. And, same thing with just big ideas. I think when you have a big, hairy idea, it's also kind of like, what are the things that get you there, and be very systematic about making sure you take those small steps to get you to that big, bold, audacious thing that you're going after.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, we've had others, suggest the taking risks and stepping outside of kind of your comfort level, but not needing to check all the boxes. That's a good way to put, not underestimating yourself or thinking that you have to have done everything in order to be a good candidate or to contribute. And so thank you for that. I think that's great advice for all of us. So I guess maybe to wrap this up, I wanted to ask maybe if you could just reflect over your time in school, or your experience even before you were at UIC, but certainly afterwards. Over that time, what were the experiences or people that influenced you most or helped inform your career? And maybe also think about how that can be interpreted by our current students or recent graduates, how they might learn from that as they move forward and maybe take advantage of those experiences and or people that they come across to make sure that they get the most out of those.
Yeah, when I reflect back on my career and I think about things, I think some of my biggest, most exciting changes happened in Chicago shortly after UIC. And I think, working at Northwestern at the time, there was a really good leader there, Karen Nordstrom, who
Yep.
then got replaced by Mike Fotis, and then replaced by Desi. And I know you know Desi Cotis too. I think all of them really demonstrated kind of a new way of thinking as far as what pharmacists could do. And I was very lucky to be invited to be a pharmacist, as a clinical pharmacist with not a PharmD in that era. I was a little bit of an outsider, but Mike Fotis really believed in me and gave me an opportunity, and I kind of ran with it. And I think, they really took the approach that, you need to be excited about what you do, and you need to be able to, we'll help you get the tools there. And so I think I give a lot of credit to Northwestern for taking a chance on me, because I feel like I was very much a non-traditional pharmacist for them. Desi was a great peer of mine. We worked very closely together. We were both managers at the time. She obviously went on to become the director of pharmacy at Northwestern, and now she's since left and gone to UCSF. So I think, I feel like I was in good company there, and they really made me feel challenged and got me excited about oncology, like I mentioned, which then kind of transitioned my role to other great leaders that I've had at other companies who have given me a little bit of extra room to grow and challenging. And so I think back on some of the other people there, I think there are definitely some strong leaders at Genentech, which like I mentioned earlier, gave me that philosophy of being bold and going big. And, I think the most recent transition in my career, I think, it really speaks to that. I'm taking on a global market access role. I've never been in a commercial role in my life. And I'm, 2 months into my job, and I'm already really enjoying it and feel that I'm contributing a lot, even though I didn't check all those boxes, as we said a minute ago. I think, being successful is as much about how excited and how you can think differently, as well as, whether you actually have the skill sets. Obviously, there are certain things that everyone needs to do to become a pharmacist, but in order to make a transition or to grow, you also have to think about what are the added things you want to put on in addition to what your basic skill set is to really stand out and to try new things and be bold.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure as you've gotten larger and larger positions and work with folks that maybe reported to you, you've had the chance to give back and you know, some of the things that you experienced and your mentors and supervisors and giving you the chances and encouragement along the way. And I appreciate you also doing that now for our students and those that might be listening to this broadcast. So thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time to talk to me today. And I know that our students will get a lot out of this. So I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.